All right. Well, welcome everybody again to another strengths conversation with Brent and Jeff. I'm Jeff Bennegamp, certified strengths coach. Say hello, Brent.
Hey,
And Brent is also a certified strengths coach on campus. Um, every week we talk about different talent and how to turn that into a superpower. And today we're going to talk about strategic. Um, strategic is in my top 5, and I can tell you I experience it on a regular basis. So I am going to be able to share some stories of some personal stories, as also offer some advice to others on maybe academics or career planning as we make sure we focus a little bit on the student experience. Um, Brent, I know this is also in your top 5. Is that right?
that is correct. I
And
found
I
it
think
just reading through some of my notes in strategic. One of the things I liked the comparison between strategic and analytical, which analytical also shows up in my top 10 strengths too. But as being a strategic person, it's like the natural evaluator of possibilities. And then for someone who has analytical, it's also like being the natural evaluator of realities. And I know I often find myself kind of, it's not necessarily a conflict, but especially in my like mapping out of decision making, I find myself saying, well, here are all the paths. This is why the path makes the most sense, because here are all the realities that might be in our way, or here are the realities that we might have to face on a given path. And whether that's a personal choice, whether that's a group decision making process, sometimes I go to, well, what has the least amount of barriers or realities that we have to face? And depending on where you're making decisions and depending on what the decision is, also feeds into how you choose whatever path you're going forward in.
And Sharon, I know you have strategic in your top 5 as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Renee, is that also your case and how you got invited because you have it in your top 5 and you're like, I'm showing up. I want to figure it
That's
out.
correct.
Well, good. I'll talk a little bit, as Brent did, about just affirming it to make sure that these things sound like us. And to me, the phrase that I think I often process is what if? What if this happens? Oh, okay, I got a plan for that. What if this happens? Oh, okay, I got a plan for that. What if this happens? Oh, okay, I got a plan for that. And I think that's a key phrase that most people with strategic would probably identify with, is they're always playing the what if game. So you're also, more than one path forward. So you're adept if somebody comes to you and says, well, how do I move out of here? You're like, okay, well, let me give you a couple of options. You could go this way, or you could go this way. And you're quickly able to discard things that have significant barriers. You're like, okay, we could go here, but wait, there is an Eiffel Tower of trouble sitting in front of us. So we need to avoid this path at all costs. And you just moving on, like, let's forget about it. And the thing that I think we should talk a lot about is, how do you do that when you're working with other people that don't see the same roadblock? Because we, the 4 of us, are so good at seeing the roadblock and then just discarding it. Like, that's a bad path. Let's not go down there. But the rest of the people you're working with are still like, well, why not? And they don't see the roadblocks yet. And so often we need to either give them time to catch up, or to sit back and say, let me show you the path to that resistance. Like, we're so good at that, it comes natural. We're like, and we might be thinking of these things. I do it all the time. I plan my next day out by looking at my meeting schedule. What do I have to have prepared? What projects do I have coming up? When I'm at home tonight watching television, at some point my brain is going to go to, what if this gets brought up? Or what if this happens? Or, the what if scenario is going to play through. So I've already thought through what they haven't even started thinking about. And I don't say that and I don't want that to sound arrogant, right? Like, look at me, I've thought about these things, because it's natural. It's a natural thing that I do, that other people don't do. And that's where these talents really lie, is it's because of something we're gifted at.
I think you hit it on the head that it's this. I would bet that this particular strength is sometimes seen by others as arrogant and know-it-all and bossy, and it's frustrating. Like you say, it's so frustrating because that's not the point. The point is that let's save time here. Let's be efficient. We've seen, of these 4 class, these 2 can drop out. Now we're just down to these. So, it's like,
right. But they still, they want to explore, they want to explore all of them.
They don't know why we're jumping to that so quickly sometimes.
Right. So what my coaching would tell me and what my suggestions would be is, first of all, when you name your strength as strategic, you need to share that with others. This is my strategic strength kicking into gear. So
nice.
Use the words that says, this is my strategic gift coming
Own
forward.
it and celebrate it.
Yeah, so let's embrace it. If you need me to bring you along, then I need to go back and explain to you the process of how I got to this conclusion. And I need to give those I'm working with permission to ask for it, to ask for that process.
That's a good point.
Because what they do is they think you're winging it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
They think you're just, all right, well, there's Jeff just steamrolling the conversation and winging it because he's so adept at winging it. And
and isn't he woo too?
Yeah, I am woo.
I know.
And I have high command.
Oh,
I know.
So
that's a
I've
great
got a couple
combo.
of those that, and I've got connectedness, which is also another winging it one.
There you
Wow.
go.
I've got a couple that people might go, oh, that's just Jeff. He's so go with the flow, man. And it's like, no, I've thought this through. And they don't know which one of those talents is coming forward.
That's a great combo, though.
Yeah, thanks. I like it. And here's where you lend it to other people is when they start to see that this is one of your talents, then they can invite you into moments where they're stuck. When they get stuck on a process or they don't know how to go forward, that's when you can share with other people. And if you can share it in advance going, I'm your person to call in. If you don't know how to move forward, like you've got a project and it seems right here, I'm the guy you call because I'm like, let's get it unstuck and I've got a plan and I'll think it through. I'll use a personal example that I think is appropriate right now. We were working with quarantine and isolation spaces. And we were figuring out how to get meals out to everyone because we've got, upwards of 30 people that have meals and 15 different locations to get them to. And Beth and Mark working hard. They were in it. And so they were in the weeds and they were just working hard to do it. And came to me and said, Jeff, can you help streamline this process? And I'm like, give me a day. And, because my strategic kicked into gear and it was, here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to do it. We'll test pilot it with this group. We're going to make this group happen. And 48 hours later, we're like, we got a system and this system seems to be working. So it was them realizing my talent would be helpful in the moment and saying, can you do it? And a real life strategic example.
That's cool. I want to throw in it, and I realize it's being recorded, so I always kind of think, do I really want to share this in a recorded sort of environment? But I'm going to. I have heard, and these people did not know that I was strategic when they said that, but somebody said something disparaging about upper administrators, that's typically a strength of theirs. And they were saying it in a way of like, yeah, they're just a bunch of people coming up with ideas and brainstorming, and these grand, lofty notions, but no putting it down into practice. Yeah. And that's not how I see strategic, but I'm afraid that's sometimes how some people interpret it on the outside,
I would also, I think there's a lot of other strengths that need to come into play when it comes to executing, right? So partnerships that, for students or maybe somebody who's, strategic, as in the quadrant of 4 quadrants of StrengthsFinder is very much on the far side of strategic thinking. It's an isolated, it sits next to learner and intellection and input. It sits over there in this I'm a thinker's thing. So you need to either rely on other talents to communicate it, executing strengths. So if you don't own those, you need to find people that can help communicate your strategy. And perhaps there's a problem, and I would admit to that problem with, if you're so rooted into these strategic thinking skills, but you can't articulate them or you can't put them into action, you could be like, I came up with a great idea. Now somebody else go and do this. I can see how that could be a problem and how people could get frustrated with that. So if you're in that boat, or you recognize that in you, find somebody who has high communication. Find somebody who has any of these executing, these achievers and discipline and all of those, to say, I want to partner with you to help get out this plan.
And I feel very grateful that I have communicator and developer in mind, and empathy and connectedness. Those are my others. So like, Renee, like you were saying, that sounds like I like my combination. I feel happy with my combination of strengths. I'm very pleased. They make me feel right.
That's nice. I'm listening to you guys. I'm trying to find mine in here because I can't remember what they all are.
I bet Jeff knows yours.
I could look it up here in about 2 seconds. That being said, I think there's also something that I always talk about when it's with strategic thinking talents is time. And this is how to take this talent of strategic and turn it into something and to work on it. Is when are you setting aside time, or when do you notice?
Yeah, that's a good one.
You're laughing because you're like, set aside time, right? But
Sharon and I are going, sure.
but maybe here's it to me, and I'll use my example again, a personal story. I know my strategic thinking works best when I'm doing a mundane task that doesn't take thinking.
Amen to that.
So I solve problems mowing my lawn. 100% of the time, if I have something that I need to contemplate, I need to go mow my lawn, shovel my sidewalk.
Great observation. Yep.
Do something that takes zero brain power, but lets my mind wander.
Good
to possibilities.
Right.
And so for you to know that you're kind of in a moment of like, I'm not sure the right way forward yet. Like I gotta spend some time thinking about it. But then if you sit down in front of your computer, you're never going to spend the time doing that.
Right.
Because you're going to be like, oh, well, there's an email, or I keyed it on this, or I need to do this project. You're never going to spend the time thinking. So what do you do that gives you that time? And it might be go for a drive.
Driving is a big one. That was
I'm
one
gonna,
of the
I'm going to go for a drive, or I'm going to sign up and deliver meals, because delivering meals takes nothing, but it gives me an hour of sitting in the car by myself.
Exactly. Right.
Well,
I noticed that when we started doing the remote everything, and I'm now sitting in Vermilion, from 8 to 5 instead of driving up to Sioux Falls for an hour and driving back from Sioux Falls for an hour, I realized how extremely much I valued that time. I had no idea how valuable that was to me until I don't have it anymore.
Oh, yeah, right.
Maybe just go and sit in your car. I mean, maybe it might be the thing to do. Just be like, I'm going to pretend I'm driving for a half hour.
Yep.
If I go outside and sit on a rock for an hour, I can solve all the world's problems. But that's it. It's taking the time to do it.
Renee,
it's prioritizing. Yes.
Renee, I have your top 5 as connectedness, learner, input, ideation, and achiever.
Oh.
So I don't have strategic in your top 5.
Oh, I thought strategic was in there. I think that might be number 6.
Might be.
Claim
everything
that one more
as
time.
number 6. If you want it, just claim it as number 6, unless you know.
I did buy them all, so I've got the whole thing.
Okay.
That's probably why I was getting. So can you say that one more time? Connectedness, learner, input, ideation,
Achiever.
achiever.
Even those though are a lot of like thinking,
Yeah.
reflection.
Yeah, input, learner, and ideation, all
Yeah.
about thinking,
Yeah.
all about
Yeah.
processing.
Mhm.
I know what
And
I've
related to
been
time.
I know what I've been trying to do, especially like because we are sitting on Zoom. I've scheduled, and I don't always follow through with it, but I have like 15 increments in the morning and in the afternoon where it's just mindfulness moments is what I call
Nice.
it. And I don't necessarily have a set thing that I do. I think the most frequent thing that I do is just take a lap around campus and go
Nice.
for a walk. But those
Smart.
moments, even if I'm like going and doing a task, like, oh, I need to pick something up from the office, that still is time that's like my time
Right.
that I can kind of do that introspective, reflection and thinking about my day. And I usually do that right before here. It's usually 3 to 3:15
How
every
about-
Yeah.
afternoon. So I always like doing that, especially before this, because then I feel refreshed from the day.
Good point. What are your strengths, Brent? What are your 5?
Mine are ideation, strategic, input, learner, and achiever.
So you and
Oh.
Renee have a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
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 That's pretty cool. Jeff, what were yours, did you say?
I am connectedness, woo, relator, strategic, and woo, relator, connectedness, strategic, and
Ideation.
God.
right?
Communicate. Were you communicator also?
Did you say ideation?
includer.
Includer. Yeah.
Includer. There you go.
Includer.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So a couple more things, just to make sure we're staying on task. If people start questioning how you get to here or how to develop this into, the superpower that we want it to be, become good at noticing the steps that you're taking to get to conclusions.
Okay.
How did you get there? And being able to articulate those steps will help other people respect and use this talent of yours. Because at first it comes across as, oh, Sharon just went there really quickly. Sharon just made a decision. Well, no, Sharon processed it through a series of steps. What we need to do is become good at recognizing the steps within us. Because sometimes it happens so quickly, we don't even process all the
Very
steps.
good point.
Mm.
And then as we start thinking about what do we need to practice, courses to maybe look at or processes, how do I take classes about systems? Is there any courses about how systems work, how organizations work, organizational management? Because that's part of strategizing and understanding why did somebody build a system like this? So practicing that. Classes that are open and encourage discussion-based courses are probably a lot better for somebody with strategic than a read, resuscitate, or read and repeat kind of course, because that doesn't allow for my brain to be strategic. It doesn't allow for professors to respect that I'm looking for new and alternative ways to come up with answers. So looking for those courses as you are advising people or as you're looking for courses. The phrase that I love that I'm thinking about that I'm reading about is called reverse engineering. Being able to explain a reverse engineering of a process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you can think about that as how did I get there from here? Let me work backwards. And then the last 2 things that we'll talk about in academics, Brent, before you can jump in is independent study courses or classes might be something that you should really explore with your advisor, because that allows that thinking process of yours to really flourish. Because now I'm just independently out there exploring something that I want to explore. So if that's an option for you, and then perhaps like marketing or engineering courses, if there's electives in those worlds, just to give you, because so many of those courses need strategy-based. They're strategy-based courses, because marketing isn't shotgun approach. There's actually a very specific strategy, but it has to be built upon a process to get from here to there. All right. Before we jump into careers, Brent, what do you got to add?
Yeah, I really like what you said, Jeff, on like reverse engineering. Sometimes I think of this a little bit because sometimes our strategic brains are like so instantaneous. We like disseminate through the potential opportunities. Like I've been thinking of it lately when I was reading through it, just like even recalling like dreams or things that you have, because you know your brain is always active and having some sort of dream that's going on at night when you're asleep. But honestly, sometimes it's challenging to recall. So like first noticing like, oh, I made a decision because of my strategic, and this is where I need to go. And like Jeff said, kind of reverse engineering, like, well, how did I come to that? Why did I make that decision? Even just asking yourself those basic who, what, when, where, why, how questions and figuring that out, I think that can be really, really helpful. Another thing, I think folks with strategic aren't afraid of change, and I think sometimes they embrace change and new things and learning new information. So that can be great because change can be refreshing, but also recognizing that sometimes that means you're associated with change. So explaining why you think change is necessary within the system that you're operating is essential, because you don't want to just be given the reputation of like, I'm just changing this because I want to change things all the time.
Right.
Mhm.
It might be interesting to run that past like somebody with restorative, because they would see something broken as easily as you would see something that could be changed.
Yeah.
And they might help you in articulating that. So finding a partner who has something like restorative to kind of say like, let's work together on this.
Or even evaluating like, are you just thinking through this change because you see the potential, or is there something broken? Like, is there actually something broken? It might be an even more appropriate question to work with someone restorative, because they might be able to be like, maybe it's not.
Yeah. You know, as we get into careers and for students that are looking at vocation and careers, something that I would probably think about is maybe work from your goal. Like, what are you going to measure success by at the end of the day, right? What does success here look like? You know, and I don't know, I hate to use the too far in advance, but something, you know, what does success look like 10 years from now? And then work backwards. How did you get there from what that looks like? And make sure when you're setting that goal of 10 years from now, that it's a balance of being fulfilled as a human and as managing our well-being and managing all those things that are important, not just, you know, yeah, I'm making $1 million, but, you know, I also have the other things that are going to make me feel fulfilled. So make sure you're doing that. And then double check and make sure that those careers that you're looking at allow you to be innovative, allow you to express your different scenarios that you're going to see. Are they flexible? Do they want creative thinkers in those, or is it, you know, and I don't know enough about enough fields, but my guess is that, you know, an auditor might not have a lot of creative thinking to go along with that, right? It's no, this is what we're doing. We're not being
And we don't want creative accountants.
Right. Do you want a creative accountant? And making sure that you're asking those questions. And then this is maybe good advice for all strengths, but somebody with strategic might really benefit from interviewing somebody who's in that field. Like you're a freshman this year, or you're a sophomore this year, and then thinking, well, I'm going to be a marine biologist. Finding somebody who's in that field and saying, can I interview you for a little bit? I want to understand if you get to use these talents in this field. Perhaps great advice for every field, but with strategic, I think it might really be beneficial.
No, I love that piece of advice because I feel like even just for myself, like I don't think I've always thought of it that way, but I've thought about strategic as like a chessboard or as a map with, you know, all these possibilities, but thinking 10 years from now, well, that's not recommended with like completing a goal within, you know, a 6-month, 3-month
Right.
year period.
Right.
That is helpful for kind of coming up with a map.
Yeah. Sharon, wait, before you go, and we'll wrap up. I got 2 things that I want to say. One, make sure you don't get stuck on a plan. Make sure you don't convince yourself that this is the only path forward, which I think is a negative, but it's also a byproduct of being so confident in your strategic that you can get stuck. And so, one, be very careful about that. And then the last thing that I think is just great advice is don't be afraid to be different.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to embrace this strength of yours and to say, I am different and I do think differently than others people, because I do process very quickly the bad sides of things. I play the what if game about stuff all day long, all night long. And that is a different talent than other people's have. So make sure that you're okay being different and just embrace it.
All right. Thank you both. This was awesome. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Stop recording.